Were the Crusades awesome? That's an interesting question I never thought I'd have to answer, but apparently I am answering that question today. My name is Zach. This channel is Gen Z Theology, where we dig deep into both historical and religious videos. I am a Christian, so full disclosure on the table. But I also dabble in history, so I'm going to do my best to try and parse out a video that I have recently seen pop up into my feed, contesting that maybe the Crusades were not as bad as people make them out to be. I'm going to try and keep the biggest open mind that I can on this. I do have my own thoughts from my own perspective, but let's just hear what the argument is, and yeah, I will break it down and give my own commentary. If you agree or disagree with me or this video, feel free to voice your concerns or your comments in the comment section. Don't act like a jerk, or I will kick you out. As fast as you put that comment in there, I will kick it out. But yeah, let's see if there's something we've missed about the Crusades.
Film Kingdom of Heaven was released to the world. The film takes place during the major historical conflict between the Christian world and the Islamic world that we today call the Crusades. Beginning in 1096, Catholic Europeans embarked on quests to retake the Holy Land and spread the faith to new areas of the globe. You would think that in a historical drama like this, we would get a fair portrayal of both sides, with the nuances of the conflict being shown. We don't. The film portrays the Christian Crusaders as bloodthirsty barbarians, while their Islamic opponents are shown as intelligent and peaceful. Now it should be said that Ridley Scott, the director of the film, is an atheist, so we can see why he deliberately decided to portray things this way. But regardless of Scott's motivation, the portrayal of the...
Okay, I'm going to stop right there because I already have a bunch of things I completely disagree with about this. One, it's been a long time since I've seen The Kingdom of Heaven. For the most part, I mean, I didn't love the film, but I think for the most part it did a pretty good job at parsing out the events of the Second Crusade, because I'm pretty sure that's what the film was about. And his kind of distinction there is like it portrays the Christians as bloodthirsty barbarians and the Muslims as peaceful conquerors. Well, for the most part, if we're looking at just specifically the siege on Jerusalem, Saladin was a proper gentleman in that. And I know we're going to get into this later, but the First Crusades, with what the Christians did, well, I'm not even going to say the Christians, with what the Crusaders did to the city of Jerusalem in that the sack on Jerusalem, as opposed to what Saladin did in the Second Crusade, allowing them safe passage out, allowing them to leave, not killing a bunch of civilians. I mean, the First Crusade, the Crusaders sieged the walls for 5 weeks, and then when they get over the walls, the amount of atrocities that they commit is wholly unthinkable. I mean, burning Jewish people alive in their synagogues, desecrating all these different holy sites, killing thousands of civilians. There's just a lot to that, and so yeah, there is some. I will. Here's what I'll admit: there's more context to everything, and I get that the Crusades have been always painted one-sidedly, as you know, the terrible Christians come down. I don't even want to say Christians because I kind of disagree with the framing of that. I get that it's called a religious war, but it's more religious war because religion was used to mask power and economics and everything else that the wars were fought for. But it's always kind of mapped out like these guys, the bad guys, these guys, the good guys. So there is more nuance. I'm happy to listen to some nuance, and I hope that nuance is provided here. But there also is a huge side of the Crusaders that was very, very violent. And there's sides to the Muslims that was very peaceful, and there's sides to the Muslims that was violent, and there's sides to probably the Crusaders that was peaceful. So that is true. I do take umbrage with the Ridley Scott kind of tear down there, because that doesn't even make sense fundamentally. Okay, Ridley Scott's an atheist. Why would he have a dog in the fight for the Muslims over the Christians? I mean, the Muslims, last time I checked, they believe in a monotheistic God. They are a religion. Atheists do not believe in God at all, so I don't know why he would want to be taking sides with the Muslims over the Christians, or the Christians over the Muslims, or whatever. So I think that's a misguided critique that this gentleman has made. It doesn't even make sense. I mean, directors can take history and they can portray things in one way or another way, just depending on what's better for the story or the movie. I don't think it has anything to do with what their religious belief system is. But yeah, I understand that there's a popular understanding of the Crusades, and maybe there's some more nuance we need to add to that. Same with there's a popular understanding of the Civil War. Sometimes we need a little more context about things like the Union and the Confederacy, but that doesn't fundamentally change the reason why a lot of times that popular perception is grounded in a lot of facts and reality. More often than not, what's problematic is if history, let's take just World War II, history portrays the Nazis as the villain. There were probably some Nazis who were nice, I would imagine. There were some Allied forces who were bad, I would imagine. But the majority testimony is yes, the German Nazis are the enemy. The German Nazis are the bad guys of the story. And history has portrayed that pretty unilaterally. So when someone comes out and says, hey, everybody's gotten it wrong, and here's the actual context, and then they portray the Nazis as the not just, the nuances of the time, but as the heroes and everybody else is the villains, that normally you should be a little concerned about. There are legitimate reasons why the Crusades are painted the way that they are. But let's take a listen to some more of his argumentation here.
Crusades and Kingdom of Heaven reflects how they've been understood by a majority of Westerners for decades. Documentaries like the History Channel's Mankind, The Story of Us single out the Crusades as a uniquely evil chapter of human history.
I think of all the wars fought over religion, the Crusades belong in their own category.
It is one of the most shameful undertakings ever embarked upon by our species.
In all of these cases, the same narrative is presented. One day...
Okay, now let me do some heavy lifting on the other side. I mean, I would agree with what Brian just said there. Was that Brian Williams? Of religious wars, surely the Crusades at least stand out. I mean, when people think of religious wars, that goes to the top of the list. Again, I disagree a little bit with some of the framing of the religion being the main source of the Crusades. I think that there's a lot of other factors that played into it, and religion was used as the blanket, kind of the thing that was put there to make it all, wrap it up in a bow, when actuality it was for a lot of other reasons. But the most shameful thing by the species, come on. It was bad. But like, if we want to talk about the most shameful things that have happened with the human species that we have perpetrated on one another, look, the Crusades don't even make that list. They don't even get close to making the list. Like, yeah, they were bad, but I mean, how about the Holocaust? How about Unit Unit 731 for the Japanese during World War II? Just the mainstream atrocities all throughout history that have taken place. Yeah, so that I agree that the framing of that with no nuance on either side is problematic. So, I can appreciate a little bit of where he's going.
Crazy Christians decided to attack the peaceful and enlightened Islamic world just because they could. The events are held as a staple of why we need separation of church and state, and why Catholicism should have no place in government. We're led to believe that if Christians have power again, they'll start unnecessary wars of religion, just like the Crusades. But in reality, there are few events in history more misunderstood than the Crusades. This is why I'm making this video. The popular understanding of the Crusades is dead wrong, and I'm here to explain why. In this video, you'll be finding out why the Crusades were not only morally justified, but were actually a historic achievement. Buckle up, because there's a lot to cover.
Okay, so...
Martin Luther
said,
I want to make Moses so German that no one would suspect he was a Jew. Now that can sound controversial.
It's because it is controversial. I'm going to get on a completely different tangent that has nothing to do with the... Martin Luther didn't like Jews, Wes. Go read The Jews and Their Lies. Not a good guy, Martin Luther. That's a whole nother side note. But, okay, so that's his framing. So he's not just arguing they were morally justified. He said they're awesome, but he's also arguing that they were not just morally justified. They were, I guess, an achievement, so a success. So that's an interesting argument to make. That's two interesting arguments to make. So I'll try to judge this as fairly as possible on both of those aspects. And again, here's what I would urge everybody to do while we're engaging in this. See the framing. He may frame it properly. I don't know. He may frame this completely properly. But like, I'm going to be very curious to see if all he does is portray all of the atrocities from one side, right, from the Muslim side, and doesn't do anything to portray the atrocities from the Christian side. Because if that is the case, if he's portraying all the good things that one side did and all the bad things the other side did, he is falling into the exact same problem that the people that he's disagreeing with fall into, and that is trying to push some form of propaganda by making history a lot smoother than it actually is. There's way too much nuance to every moment of history, especially when we're dealing with huge, vast swaths of time, cultures, people, all of that factor into this. So morally justified, I'm going to be surprised. Look, the Crusades were very brutal. So morally justified is going to be an interesting claim to make. Certainly, we have to judge them a little bit differently, too, because they are portrayed, at least by Pope Urban, who gives out the first Crusade, manifesto. They're portrayed as a Christian war. Right? They're portrayed like the Pope and God is sanctioning this. So you're going to have to run up against what Jesus says. And there's a lot that Jesus says. So let's see. Let's see.
Let's travel back in time to 600 AD, roughly 500 years before the First Crusade. This is a map of the Christian world at that time. All the highlighted areas show where Christianity had spread and become the majority religion. Wait a minute, is that the Middle East and North Africa? Yes, it is. These two areas used to be Christian. People today think of these as Muslim lands, but that was not always the case. It all began when Christianity spread far and wide after being legalized by Emperor Constantine the Great with the Edict of Milan. This led to the Christianization of both the Western and Eastern Roman Empire. Even as the western part of the empire fell to barbarians, Christianity remained, and most of the barbarians also converted. So if that happened in Europe, what happened in the Middle East and North Africa? In the mid-600s, Arab warlords sprang out of the Arabian Peninsula and began conquering everything in their path. They brought with them their own religion, Islam, and unlike European barbarians, they did not convert to Christianity. The Middle East...
Okay, let's stop it right there. I do love... So he talks about the Christianity from the Roman Empire expanding into the West, right? And the people... I guess we're talking about like the Franks at that point, maybe the Britannia or whatever it is, but like how Rome spread to the West. And he's like, well, they spread it to the west. Sorry, I can't talk right now. They spread it to the west, and then the West, most of them converted. But he framed that very much like there was no military conquest at all associated with that. Like it was just a bunch of missionaries going up and spreading the gospel, and everybody just accepted it wholesale. So right off the bat, we're portraying the world of Christianity in a certain way, and we're going to not portray the enemies, the so-called enemies, in that way, because now he's talking about now the Muslims arise. Basically, it was 600 AD or so, and then they do something different, right? They're just conquering everyone in their path. Well, are we going to act like Rome wasn't conquering people in their path and then slapping a Christian label on things to make sure that things were justified? And also, I take a little bit of, I'm going to say umbrage again. I love that word. I take a little umbrage here too as well, because the Middle East, had several Christian influences, but there was Zoroastrianism that was a huge deal. There was a lot of polytheism going on there. It was not uniformly one thing, and there was infighting between everybody. So it's not just like everybody was living in a series of peace until the bad old Muslims showed up and did something about it. And this is not to defend the Muslims either, because there's context there as well.
At the time was dominated by two superpowers, the Christian Eastern Roman Empire, or the Byzantine Empire, and the Zoroastrian Sassanid Empire. Unfortunately for them both, they had just fought each other in a gigantic war lasting 25 years and had drained themselves of key resources. Because of this, neither was prepared for the invasions that hit them. The Byzantines lost all of Africa and the Levant, while the Sassanid Empire collapsed completely. The most important loss for the Christian world, though, was the loss of the Holy Land. By 900 AD, Islam had expanded, by conquest, all the way to France and southern Italy. Now, I'm not going to moralize about this. Conquest and wars of expansion have been common all through history, and Islam followed in that same mold. However, Islam did take things a step further with its concept of jihad, or holy war. Muhammad was a conqueror who took slaves, and Islam has sought to emulate his example ever since. As a side note, this is also why slavery has always been common in the Islamic world and continues to be practiced there to this very day. But regardless of the morality of the Islamic conquests, they were, nonetheless, invaders who invaded the Christian world. Christians in conquered
Okay, I can agree with, yes, that's true. Slavery is still, at least at this point, practiced in Muslim countries, and yeah, it certainly is. That's very, very problematic. But at the same time, let's just look at the context of what we're dealing with. Jihad and holy war. I mean, the taking of slaves. People were taking slaves and have been taking slaves all throughout human history. I mean, slavery does not end basically officially until we start getting into William Wilberforce, way into the 17th and 18th centuries. So, I mean, their wars of aggression, I'm not sure exactly how that's different than maybe the other wars of aggression that have taken place. These really, in actuality, they're what nations have always done. They're territory wars. They're expanding their influence, they're expanding their spheres, they're expanding their power. However, it certainly is backed up with the guise of a holy war to where they're also expanding their religion. So I think that's fair to say that, you know, where the Muslims were going, they were expanding their religion, and life wasn't all that great for people who would fall underneath their religion. But then again, I mean, it wasn't all that great for the people who disagreed with the Christians over in in the Western world either. So it was just the time. The time was certainly a brutal time.
lands were second-class citizens, and many were taken as slaves. Christian inhabitants had to pay an enormous tax called the dhimmi tax, and their churches were often shut down. Because of Islamic policies, over the centuries, Christianity in the Middle East and North Africa shrunk from a large majority to a tiny minority. But it actually gets even worse.
Patients around the world are cleaning their retainers
More
wrong.
commercials.
Here are the 3 worst ways to clean your retainers. 1. Brushing. This
You get YouTube Premium.
During the days of the Roman Empire, the Mediterranean Sea was a breadbasket of commerce and trade. The Romans had successfully stamped out piracy and created some of the safest waterways in the entire world. Islamic piracy brought all of this to an end. From bases in North Africa and the Middle East, they turned the Mediterranean into an unsafe hellhole. This crashed the European economy and made Europe a miserable place for commerce for almost 400 years. Islam's so-called Golden Age came at Europe and Christianity's expense. This is the true reason that many consider the years 600 AD to 1000 AD a dark age for Europe. It was literally cut off from the entire world and constantly under attack.
By itself, 600 to 1000, by the feudal era was raging in full effect, and Christianity was fighting itself, or the Catholic regions were. And if I'm not mistaken, mainly because of religious dogma that cut off classic Greek thought. Classicalism was basically being expunged from the Western world, so it cascaded it into a form of dark age, which would not be kind of lifted till we get to the Renaissance period. So to act like the Dark Ages were not self-inflicted at all and was just the process of another nation conquering trade routes and cutting other nations off from stuff. And trade was in full effect, by the way. Trade was a huge part of these disputes. But again, the context he's providing, more often than not, he's providing context that explains why the Crusades had so many multifaceted reasons. They had trade reasons, money reasons, power reasons. The Great Schism had happened, and it takes place in 1054. And when the Pope of the Western world, sees an opportunity, Pope Urban sees an opportunity to come down and maybe retake some power with the Christians who have split off from him, that's a reason. There's power reasons going all on. There's fortune reasons. So this wasn't just merely a religious war for the sake of a religious war. Religion was slapped as a label onto it, and people then behaved in egregious ways that would never be sanctioned by true Christianity, would never be sanctioned by Jesus, who they were claiming to fight for.
It was in this hellish environment that Christendom finally started to have enough. The first rumblings for a crusade came in 846 when an Arabic expedition to Sicily sailed up the Tiber River and sacked St. Peter's in Rome. A synod in France called for Christian sovereigns to rally against the enemies of Christ, and the Pope, Leo IV, offered a heavenly reward to those who died fighting the Muslims. But it was around 1000 AD when things really escalated on multiple fronts. In the west, the Islamic Caliphate of Cordoba in Iberia began expanding north. It conquered, burned, and enslaved its way through multiple Christian cities, including Barcelona and Leon. It was this expansion campaign that finally provoked the Christian kingdoms to launch the Reconquista to retake Iberia from Islam. But if things looked rough in Western Christendom, they were even worse in the East. In the late 900s, a Central Asian Muslim group called the Seljuk Turks began migrating into Anatolia. In 1064, they completely conquered Armenia and sacked its
Seljuks
capital,
really
Ani.
ruined some
The
things
city
for
never
everybody.
recovered from this
They
brutality
really did
and
kinda
remains a
ruin things.
ruin to this very day. Almost all of the Armenian population had to migrate southeast to Cilicia, creating an entire new kingdom called Cilician Armenia.
Yeah, but it's not just the Seljuk Turks do kind of add some fly in the ointment of what was kind of an okay arrangement, but that's not the main reason. Armenia has had problems many things happened to the Armenians and the Armenian land way after the Seljuks show up. But yes, this is a problematic time for sure.
In other words, Islam had made the Armenian homeland unlivable.
A lot of
the
people
Turks
have done
then
that.
turned their expansion into the Byzantine Empire. They began invading western Anatolia in droves. The Byzantines tried to launch counterattacks, but were ultimately defeated at the Battle of Manzikert. After this defeat, Turks began mass migrating into Anatolia, completely altering its demographics. Another region of the Christian world had just become Islamic by force. Here's how historian John J. O'Neill describes the circumstances. These, then, are the major political events which prefigured the First Crusade. Within a span of 35 years, the Turks had seized control of Christian territories larger than the entire region of France, and now they were a real threat to Europe. Now, by this point, the Byzantine Empire realized...
Yeah, but he's also lumping basically all Muslims together in one specific group, like there weren't fighting factions. I know the Seljuks had other groups that they were enemies with of the Muslim persuasion. That's like it's not universal how this all took place. It's not one kind of group against another, so there is some more nuance that needs to be put into that.
It was incapable of stopping the Islamic hordes by itself. Emperor Alexius Comnenus made a desperate appeal to the Pope and Western Christendom for aid.
Urban.
This was a major deal, because Eastern and Western Christendom had been in schism for almost 50 years by this point. The Catholic Pope and the Orthodox Patriarchs did not get along, to put it lightly. But the issue had become that serious that they were now willing to cooperate. What made matters even more...
No, the issue was that serious that the Eastern people were willing to ask for help from the Western, and the Western Pope was more than happy to do that because the Western Pope had no influence in the Eastern side anymore after the schism, and he goes, hey, I see an opportunity here because of power, because that's... It wasn't just like the Western Christians were sitting over there like, let's go help out those Eastern heretics, because everybody was condemning one another. Everybody thought they were outside of the grace of God because the Eastern Church had left the Catholic Church. I'm pretty sure they had been anathema away from the kingdom of God. So at this point, it's not just like we want to go help out our Christian brothers because bad things are happening to them. There's a lot of motivational factors that the Pope is actually looking at in this. This isn't just about joining Team Christian.
Urgent was that Turks had begun persecuting Christian pilgrims in the Holy Land. Priests like Peter the Hermit, who would become one of the greatest advocates of the Crusades, witnessed this firsthand. This is the geopolitical environment that led to the First Crusade being called. Now, does it seem unreasonable when you get all of this other context? This is what Catholic Europeans knew about Islam on the eve of the First Crusade. Muslims were enemies of Christ, they waged wars against non-combatants and enslaved women and children, and they had conquered all of Iberia, Anatolia, and threatened France and Italy. It was important that this all happened.
Yeah, so if the argument is that there was an invading army that was invading the way of life of another group of people and they wanted a territory war, then fine. But if the argument is that they're morally justified based on the grounds that Christians should pick up a sword and go to another country and fight for Christianity, to spread Christianity, not through acts of deeds and love and mercy, like the song Lead On, O King Eternal says, which is a beautiful song, Lead On, O King Eternal, for not with swords loud clashing or stir of roaring drums, but with deeds of love and mercy the heavenly kingdom comes. Jesus himself says, my kingdom is not of this world. If it were of this world, then my disciples would fight, but they don't fight because my kingdom is not of this world. And he says, those who live by the sword will perish by the sword. Jesus brought in a kingdom of love and of mission work, and a kingdom that was meant to be established through the persecution of his saints. The message would spread to the whole of the world. He did not commission nations to rise up against other nations that disagree with you and go kill them. And in very brutal ways, like the Crusades, actually took place. That was not in Jesus's radar of commands that he was giving to people. And not merely just that, by the way. Not merely is that the problem. The other problem is it violates the love your neighbor. You know, love your neighbor, be good to those who curse you, bless those who treat you badly, turn the other cheek. And I'm not saying that nations don't have a right to defend themselves. If you want to make the argument this is a territory dispute, this is a dispute for power, fine. Nations have the right to defend themselves. Nations have the right to decide to invade whoever they want to invade at any time. But don't slap the Christian label onto it and say it was morally justified and bring Jesus' name into this like this was something that he would have been okay with. It absolutely was not. It was fought for many different reasons, and religion was smeared over it. But this is what drives me a little bit crazy. This is nothing against Catholics, but this drives me crazy about the Catholic mindset, the young Catholic mindset that loves the institutionalism of the nation state that is Catholicism and wants to swing its weight around in the weight room. That's not where it's at, and that's not where all Catholics are at. That's just a subset of them. Most Catholics agree with the general idea that we don't want to be a nation that forces other people to agree with our specific ideals. But this is problematic because this is not Christianity, and I do take issue with this being portrayed as a morally justified endeavor. I think it's problematic.
And at the turn of the first millennia, by this time, the elites of Europe were finally starting to become much wealthier and better educated. They were developing a much stronger grasp of history and world affairs. Europe was safer and more interconnected than any time since the Roman Empire. They were beginning to truly understand just how much damage Islam had done to the Christian world, and how much of a civilizational threat it still represented. All the pieces were now in place for the Crusades to be launched. In 1095, the moment had arrived. Pope Urban II called for the First Crusade to retake the Holy Land and drive back Islam. It would be the first of many. An excerpt from Urban's Crusade speech reads, "Your brethren who live in the East are in urgent need of your help, and you must hasten to give them the aid which has been promised them. The heathens have killed many, and they have destroyed churches and devastated the Greek Empire. If you permit them to continue with impunity, the faithful of God will be much more widely attacked by them. On this account, I, or rather the Lord, beseech you as Christ's heralds to publish this everywhere, and to persuade all people of whatever rank to carry aid promptly to those Christians. Let therefore hatred depart from among you. Let your quarrels end. Let wars cease. And let all dissensions and controversies slumber."
Yeah, except for your hatreds of the people who don't agree with you. Except for that, let all of your hatreds cease and love your Christian neighbor. But those evil and twisted and awful heathens, go kill them and do it in a very brutal fashion. And again, there's the invoked Lord. The Pope invokes the Lord. That this is God's way of doing things. When I mean, at this point, it would have been nice if the Pope had read some of Jesus's words. But again, makes total sense from a political standpoint. I can agree with it from a political standpoint. If you want to increase your power to the East, which has basically told you to screw off because of the great schism that takes place and the problems with the filioque, then fine. But don't ascribe this to a war that God is telling you to fight.
Important to point out how Pope Urban's speech emphasized not only the defense of Christendom, but also the end of internal wars between Christian kingdoms. The Pope envisioned an international brotherhood of Catholics who fought not each other, but their external threats.
With him,
in any case,
with
the call for
him
crusade
at the
was
front,
extreme.
with him at the front of the army. That's what he envisioned. He envisioned a chance to get my power back that I have lost. He was like, this is not pure pious. You know, let's get together. Yeah. So much fun that we can share. The Pope had in his mind what he wanted this to be.
Extremely well received. The news spread through all of Europe like wildfire. Tens of thousands of faithful Catholics all across Europe answered the Pope's call. Lowly peasants, ambitious knights, even kings. French, English, Flemish, German, people from all walks of life
Depending on
and
what crusade,
all
yeah.
nationalities were inspired to fight for Christendom. It's not really appreciated how much of an accomplishment that this alone was. It's really something entirely unique in human history. The Catholic Church had created a multinational network that united Europeans of all stripes and ethnicities under a common faith with common goals. So many different Europeans being united by one religion and engaging in a civilization-wide struggle had not happened before and has not happened since. Catholicism achieved what hundreds of other religions and ideologies could not. And perhaps this is why our modern secular system demonizes the Crusades. Now, did every crusade
I love that he just described Catholicism as its own religion. I guess that means that this gentleman doesn't think that Protestants or Orthodox are, a part of Christianity proper, or maybe he just thinks Catholicism is its own religion. Yeah, again, this guy's Catholicism is showing so much in this video. This is the side of Catholicism I do not appreciate, do not like. And also, let's point out, for most of these people, like for the guys, the Pope did not head this war up. For most of the guys who did, they were ambitious. They wanted money. They wanted more power. And for the soldiers that fought with him, I mean, look, the feudal system was the way that it was. Nobody could advance in the society. It was really hard to. We take for granted social mobility and the ability of us being able to do that in America. It was not the case that you could just socially move up in your hierarchy without certain, opportunities being presented to you. For a lot of the soldiers, this was the best opportunity. You go win some honor in the Holy Lands, and then you come back to your own place, and you have, a higher status. So do not get this twisted. More of these people, it's the same way that in the Civil War, most of the soldiers, the poor soldiers, were not fighting for the South because they really wanted to preserve the institution of slavery. They weren't benefiting from slavery at all. They couldn't own a slave. They would never hope to own a slave. It was the really rich people in the South who wanted people to fight for their right to own slaves. And that's mainly how it is. Same with this. Most of these people are not fighting this war because they want to stop the evil Muslims from destroying Christianity. They're fighting it for a lot of reasons: money, power, social mobility. So again, this video has no real nuance. Like it's committing the same cardinal sin it has issues with of these other people. Is it presents no nuance. It's not even talking about what happened in the Crusades, really. It's not even getting into those details of how brutal that they were, the death and the suffering that these Crusaders, I'm not going to say the Catholics or the Christians, these Crusaders inflicted onto people, and vice versa, that Muslims inflicted back. There's so much to it. Also, never mind. I'll get into that in a minute. Probably this gets brought up.
Always go the best it could have gone? No, of course not. Some crusades were huge successes, like the Reconquista, while others were dismal failures, like the Fourth Crusade.
The Reconquista,
but even the
yes, thank you. The Fourth Crusade. The Reconquista entered us into the Inquisition, which I've also seen on this guy's channel that he has a video of why the Inquisition was awesome. So that one's just gonna boggle my mind. Like a defense of the Inquisition. I can't wait to try and watch that. If you guys want to see me watch and react to that, let me know. Because golly, I have things to say about the Inquisition. But yeah, let's talk about the Fourth Crusade. Like, if this is supposed to be this wonderful Christian time where we all the Christians got together in unity to go fight the infidels, then explain to me why the Christians are attacking one another. Like, the Fourth Crusade was an abysmal, stupid failure that showed deep down in the heart of hearts, most of these people are not fighting for Christianity and against Islam. They're fighting for money and power, as I said, because the Christians are fighting one another. And I can't remember, what was it, Zara? Is that where the fleet came in and the Christians started fighting one another? So, like, add some nuance into the video, I guess. That would be my main critique with this.
Failures are understandable in context. Crusaders were going halfway across the world to fight unfamiliar enemies on their own home turf. The
And killing
logistics
one
of the
another.
Crusades alone were a monumental undertaking, and despite all
That's
these
true. I
challenges,
agree with
the
that.
Christian forces still often came out on top. The First Crusade could really only be qualified as a roaring success. Crusaders defeated almost every Muslim army they encountered and captured Jerusalem. For the first time in hundreds of years, the Holy Land was back under Christian control. The First Crusade
There you
also
go.
established Crusaders.
He just and passed right over how they did it. Morally justified, by the way, was in this video. Morally justified. Not going to talk about the burning of Jewish people in synagogues. That's just not going to. That'll be off our lips. Not going to talk about the killing of the Muslim civilians because the brutality of it once the siege was done of Jerusalem. Not going to talk about how they went into the Orthodox Church and they brought the priests out and they forced them to confess loyalty to the Pope. We're not going to talk about that. The abuse against women and children. That's not going to be mentioned at all. How the actual Crusaders wrote their own accounts at how shocked they were by the violence, by the slaughter. It wasn't really a conquering of a city. It was just slaughtering people for basic no reason but hatred. That's just going to be completely glossed over as we say they were morally justified. He's not gotten into any moral terms at all about this. That's what's problematic. There's no nuance to this at all. This is the same kind of propaganda from the other side. If you want to make the argument that if we're going to demonize one side, we should show the bad sides of the other side, I agree. Absolutely. Let's do that. But we shouldn't just present all of the bad things like we did at the beginning of this video that the Muslims were doing and present nothing that the Crusades did when they got down there. That's bad scholarship.
States that would remain in the Middle East for another century. One crusade I personally like was the Sixth Crusade. Jerusalem had fallen back into Muslim hands, but they had started to fight each other in a civil war.
Like the Fourth
Emperor
Crusade
Frederick
with the Christians?
II of the Holy Roman Empire negotiated a peaceful transfer of Jerusalem back into Christian rule. Jerusalem was retaken without a single drop of blood being spilled. A decisive diplomatic victory, even if the Muslims would eventually take it back. As you can tell, during this time period, it was hard for just about anybody to hold on to Jerusalem for long. In the end, the Crusades secured Christendom's western flank and bought its eastern flank another 300 years. It wasn't until the emergence of the Ottoman Empire in the 1300s that Islam once again threatened Europe. But even when that happened...
I think it could be argued that the Fourth Crusade specifically caused so many problems for the eastern side of Christianity that the Crusades were not helpful in the least bit. If anything, they were very deleterious. So, there's that.
Crusaders once again went out to stop them. The Crusade of Nicopolis and the Crusade of Varna are two big examples of this. While they didn't succeed in stopping the Ottomans, they did show that Christendom was still capable of uniting to fight common threats in the name of God. And in the end, 300 years later in the 1600s, Ottoman power would be broken by what was basically a crusade. The Christian Holy League of Austria, Poland, Venice, and Russia united to defeat the Ottomans and drive them back from Europe. Despite all of this, some people say the Crusades failed. But did they? Europe was Christian when the Crusades were launched, and it's still majority Christian today, 1,000 years later. Although it is secularizing due to modernist.
That wasn't the point of the Crusades. The Crusades were to retake the Holy Land. If you redefine the goalpost of what they were trying to do, they were a big success. Hey, you know what? The Civil War was a huge success for the Confederacy because at the end of the day, those southern states still exist, don't they? There's still Alabama and Louisiana. They still exist. That wasn't the point of the Confederacy wanted to be its own country. It wasn't to try and preserve the states actually existing. That was never their intended goal. The goal of the Crusades was to take the Holy Land. It wasn't to protect Europe from becoming a holy Muslim, and that was never on the table. Like, the Muslims were never going to be able to invade all of Europe. Let's not be crazy about this. All right, that was not going to happen. There was never a time that was going to happen, except maybe when we get to the Ottomans, but that's way down the line from when the Crusades ever were even in effect. So, yeah, success if you redefine the rules, I guess, of what their own their own stated goals were. So you're redefining the Crusaders' goals as well, because they wanted to retake the Holy Land.
Ideologies. Ironically, it's only after the Pope lost his power to call crusades that Christianity started to decline in Europe. But when we look back at these events, history shows it's not a shameful chapter of Catholic history, but the total opposite.
Oh, no,
the Christian
it is.
world defended itself and spread the faith abroad after hundreds and hundreds of years of abuse. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why the Crusades were awesome indeed. This has been Pax, and thank you so much.
The Crusades were awesome. I think the Catholics themselves have apologized for the Crusades. I think the Pope himself has done that. The framing of this video, is this rage bait? Is this what this is meant to be? Is it meant to rage bait people? I mean, I feel like this guy would love it if the Catholic Church became the Catholic Church of 1,000 years ago. Like, do you want to go to war with the Protestants too? Do you want to restart those wars? Would you like your Catholic Church down the road to come, bring its congregants over to a Baptist church, my Baptist church, or my non-denominational church, and do you want us to fight one another? Is that what you'd like? Should I go write letters and join hands with the Presbyterian church down the road from me and the Catholic church down the road from me, and should we go try and burn down the Muslim mosque downtown, or go destroy the Jewish synagogue? Is that really the goal? Are we going to act like Christianity has not progressed in a positive way away from that? Because of course it has, and it's shameful to bring up a period of Christian history that so fundamentally disagrees with the words of Jesus himself, and present that as not just nuanced, not just there's more to the story, not just we should look at this, and I agree with that, we should look at this with a better lens, but no, it's awesome. It was awesome. I want that to sink into your head. When the Christians were going into Jerusalem and killing women and children, that was awesome. When they were burning Jewish people in their synagogues, that was awesome. And running around the streets singing hymns while killing innocent civilians who did nothing to them, that was awesome. That was not awesome. That was shameful. And I'm glad that we have moved past those things. Now, history in itself is nuanced. That doesn't mean that one side is the complete villain and the other side is the complete hero. It means that human civilization is nuanced. People are nuanced. Christianity proper is not what the Crusade. The Christianity doesn't look like the Crusades. Christianity understood properly looks like people being burned at the stake in Roman Colosseums, being fed to lions, missionaries who are spreading the gospel because it's been outlawed and are being hunted and killed. And through every time someone is killed, when Peter is crucified upside down, when Paul is beheaded for his faith, when Stephen is stoned to death for proclaiming what he believes about Jesus, when all of that takes place and all of the atrocities fall onto the heads of Christians who all they want to do is spread their gospel, it points back to the cross when all of humanity put God himself upon a cross and killed him. And and as he died, drops of anguish and love and mercy came flowing down to heal the people who hated him. Jesus came to heal people who hated him. Jesus came to heal the people who yes, were deeply violent and disagreed with him. But he didn't come with a sword to force them into contrition and force them by the rights of his power into accepting his religion or accepting a relationship with him. And neither have Christians all throughout history as we have spread the gospel. When we effectively spread it, we don't spread it with swords and with tanks and with cannons and with knives. We spread it with deeds of love and mercy like Jesus has taught us to, and we watch the world around us heal. And certainly it's not awesome when those kinds of things happen. And I think that most Christians agree with that, and I don't think most Catholics agree with this either. If you're a Catholic, please comment down in the comment section. Do you guys believe this stuff? Do you want to go back to the days of the Crusades? And I don't think most of them do. I think we've progressed, but yeah, no, I have a problem with that. If people want me to, I'll go watch this thing on the Inquisition. I'm sure that'll make me even madder. But this is Gen Z Theology. If you want to hear more nuance to the public discourse on things, that's what we want to try and do. We want to provide a little more nuance. There's not everybody is the worst, not everybody is the best. We want to find some middle ground in between this. But yes, I did not like this video. I mean, there was some stuff that was interesting about it. It was well made, so I'll give him that. Well made, good production value. I don't think that it helped us get to the bottom of anything. If anything, it will radicalize people into more propaganda. But I'll see you guys on the next video. This is Gen Z Theology, signing out.